Hello and welcome. Can Chief Audit Executive develop policies and procedures? Maybe yes. Is it appropriate for Chief Audit Executive to assume role beyond internal auditing? How to prevent impairment in independence and objectivity? Who should evaluate the risk of potential impairment? And what's the prohibition period for auditors from assessing specific operations for which they were responsible? While reviewing Standard 1112, which is about the Chief Audit Executive's role beyond internal auditing, we'll try to get responses to all these questions. So, as per Standard 1112, the Chief Audit Executive roles beyond internal auditing, it requires from us to check that where the Chief Audit Executive has or is expected to have roles and responsibilities that fall outside of internal auditing, then safeguards must be in place to limit the impairment to objectivity and independence. So, as per interpretation of the standard, the Chief Audit Executive may be asked to take additional responsibilities or an additional role outside of internal auditing, such as compliance or risk management activities. These roles and responsibilities may impair or appear to impair the organizational independence of the internal audit activity or the individual objectivity of the internal auditor. So, as per standard, safeguards must be taken to prevent the impairment. So, what are safeguards? As per interpretation, the safeguards are those oversight activities often undertaken by the board to address these potential impairments, and may include such activities as periodical evaluations of the reporting lines and responsibilities, and developing the alternative processes to obtain assurance related to the areas of additional responsibility. As per implementation guide, the International Standard 1112 notes that when the Chief Audit Executive takes on the roles and responsibilities outside of internal auditing, the organizational independence of the internal audit activity or the individual objectivity of the internal auditor may be impaired or appear to be impaired. However, in certain circumstances, the board and the senior management may find it appropriate for the organization to expand the role of Chief Audit Executive beyond internal auditing. Let's review some of the examples of situations when the Chief Audit Executive may be asked to perform roles for which the management is normally responsible for, and these may be like a new regulatory requirement comes and that prompts a pressing need to develop policies, procedures, controls, and the risk management activities to ensure compliance. It can be an organization maybe need the current risk management activities to be adopted for the addition of a new business segment or unit or a geographical market. Another example can be the organizational resources are too constrained, or the organization is too small that to afford the separate compliance function, for example. And the organization's processes are so immature at this point of time that the chief audit executive has the most appropriate expertise to introduce risk management principles in the organization. And in some cases, the chief audit executive may be expected to assume the responsibilities of risk management, design, and operation of control and compliance. For example, if chief audit executive is asked to take on a role that reports functionally to senior management instead of the board, the chief audit executive's independence related to internal audit responsibilities may be impaired. And we can refer back to the implementation guide 1130, which is about the impairment to independence or objectivity for the additional responsibilities or the potential impairment. And also you can refer to the standard 1112, which guides the chief audit executive in such cases. To implement a standard 1112, the chief audit executive must have a clear understanding of the IIA's code of ethics and the concepts of the independence and objectivity as explained in the standard series of 1100. You can refer back to my video on that, and also the implementation guides relevant to that. Additionally, several of the IIA's core principles for the professional practice of internal auditing address independence and objectivity with more clarity. The internal audit activities mission statement and the charter of the internal audit function and the audit committee charter and organizational policies and code of ethics for the organization that may include the additional relevant guidance specific to the organization. To address the risk of impairment, the chief audit executive should gain an understanding first of any proposed role that falls outside of internal auditing and speak with the senior management and the board about the reporting relationships, responsibilities, and expectations related to the role. During such a discussion, the chief audit executive should emphasize the IIA standards, the potential impairment presented by the proposed role, the risk associated with the proposed role, and the safeguards that could mitigate those risks. As we discussed, that standard 1112 emphasizes the importance of safeguards to eliminate the impairment, such as these safeguards are like the oversight activities often undertaken by the board to address potential impairment to the chief audit executive's independence and objectivity. One safeguard is the chief audit executive's organizational position and reporting relationship. You may refer back to my video on standard 1110, organizational independence, which requires the chief audit executive to report on a level within the organization that allows the internal audit activity to fulfill its responsibilities. This is effectively achieved when the chief audit executive reports functionally to board, which usually involves the board oversight for chief audit executives: hiring, evaluation, compensation, the approval of charter, the budget, internal audit plan, resource plan. As stated in the Standard 1000, which is about the purpose, authority, and responsibility of the internal audit charter, this charter documents the nature of the chief auditor functional reporting relationship with the board. Now, any amendments or changes in the organizational structure or its key personnel may lead to the repositioning or redefinition of the roles and responsibility. According to the interpretation of Standard 1112, one safeguard that may address this situation is the periodical evaluation of reporting lines and responsibilities. The Chief Audit Executive's review of the internal audit charter and discussion with the senior management and board, as described in Standard 1000, should include any changes in the role and responsibilities of the Chief Audit Executive that may affect the internal audit activity, particularly those that have the potential to impair the Chief Audit Executive's independence and objectivity, either in fact or in appearance. If the Chief Audit Executive non-audit responsibilities will be ongoing, that the internal audit charter then should have the amendments and should describe the nature of work on those non-audit activities. However, if such responsibilities which are beyond internal audit will be for a short-term basis, the changes to the internal audit charter are not required, and other documents also may not be necessary to change. However, in such cases, a transitional plan should be prepared that define the responsibilities of the management which internal auditor is performing, and what safeguards are being imposed, and ideally it would ensure that the proper resources and timeline to facilitate the management acceptance of these responsibilities is mentioned here. So gradually after this short term period, the internal auditor will transfer these responsibilities to the management. We will discuss Standard 1130, impairment to independence or objectivity, in one of our upcoming videos. However, it is appropriate to discuss one portion of the requirement of Standard 1130 on the disclosure of impairment. The Chief Audit Executive is required to disclose the details of any impairment to independence or objectivity, whether in fact or appearance. Disclosures which enable the board to evaluate the overall risk of potential impairment. Typically, these disclosures this discussion takes place during a board meeting, and may include a discussion of related topics like the roles and responsibilities of Chief Audit Executive, which is and that the Chief Audit been asked to undertake, which is beyond the internal auditing, the risk related to that undertaking, and the safeguards to the Chief Audit Executive's independence and objectivity, including consideration of appearances. Controls in place to validate that the safeguards are operating effectively. Transition plan, if the assignment is short term, for example, we discussed that. An agreement with the senior management and the board on these rules which are beyond internal auditing. The board can monitor the Chief Audit Executive's objectivity by increasing the level of scrutiny applied to the Chief Audit Executive's risk assessment, internal audit plan, and engagement communication, and considering any potential bias the Chief Audit Executive may have. related to an area for which he or she was responsible for, and which was beyond the internal auditing. To help safeguard the Chief Audit Executive from impairment to objectivity, for example, the Standard 1130A1 prohibits internal auditors from assessing the specific operations for which they were responsible within the previous year. So, there is a time period of one year has been given here. And Standard 1130A2 requires a party outside of internal audit activity to oversee assurance engagements for functions over which the Chief Audit Executives has had the responsibility of. Reporting of outsourced party. If the Chief Audit Executive has responsibilities in areas outside the internal audit activity that are subject to internal auditing, the provision of assurance would be outsourced to an objective, competent assurance provider. Here the important point is that that party reports independently to the board rather than the Chief Audit Executive. Such an assurance provider could be either internal or external. An external assessment of internal audit activity, which we discussed in Standard 1312, that includes a review of the Chief Audit Executive's independence and objectivity, particularly in areas where the Chief Audit Executive has executed non-audit responsibilities. That external assessment can provide additional assurance to the board as long as the independence of the external assessor can be validated. So, here we are providing two assurances. Number one, the outsourced party is directly reporting to the board, not the Chief Audit Executive, and second is the external assessment report, which if it is done by, it is a validated report by the independent external assessor, that is providing the second assurance. So, now the most important segment of this standard, which is how we can demonstrate conformance with the Standard 1112. Documentation of any safeguards that were established to address potential impairments to the Chief Audit Executive's independence and objectivity may help demonstrate conformance with the Standard 1112. Such documentation may include statements in the organizational policies and code of ethics. It can be included in the audit committee charter and the internal audit activities mission statement and approved charter, which specifies the Chief Audit Executive's roles and responsibilities as agreed with the senior management and the board. Conformance may also be demonstrated through periodic revisions of the internal audit charter, which reflect the internal audit executives' activities, changing roles and responsibilities. Likewise, plans to transition roles and responsibilities that fall outside of internal auditing. For example, compliance or risk management activities from the Chief Audit Executive to management may also demonstrate, this is transition from Chief Audit Executive to management, may also demonstrate conformance. Additionally, evidence could include the minutes of the meetings of the board during which the Chief Audit Executive disclosed potential impairments to independence or objectivity and proposed safeguards to mitigate the risk of impairment to acceptable level. The Chief Audit Executive could demonstrate conformance by showing that the other assurance providers assess the areas where the Chief Audit Executive has undertaken roles beyond internal auditing, and the internal audit plan, risk assessments and engagement communications were independently assessed for independence and objectivity. Also, surveys of audit clients and the board evaluations of Chief Audit Executive performance may include feedback on perception of the chief audit executive's independence and objectivity. Conformance may also be validated in the results of external assessments performed by an independent assessor. So, concluding our discussion on Standard 1112, we have learned that the chief audit executive can take roles beyond internal auditing if the safeguards are taken, the senior management board is aware of, it is well documented through the discussion, through the minutes, the impairment of independence and objectivity, the risk of that impairment is mitigated by putting those safeguards. As we asked one question, that can chief audit executive develop policies and procedures? The answer is yes. In this exceptional situation where the things are properly documented and the risk of impairment is mitigated, and can assume the role beyond the internal auditing, but the safeguards have to be implemented. The prohibition period, as we said, is 1 year for the auditors if they are performing or assessing the operations for which they were responsible for. So, they need to wait for a year, and then after that they are able to objectively review that part of the operation. Thank you so much for watching my videos, and then thank you so much for liking it. Keep liking it, keep subscribing it, and expect some more videos on internal audit and related topics. Thanks again.